You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show. The preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hello, welcome to the education roller coaster with a brain. This is Chris Voss. I'm your host of the Chris Voss Show. For 13 years, do I still have to say I'm your host? I mean, if you ever show up to the Chris Voss Show and it's not Chris Voss sitting at the desk, that's probably not going to be a good sign. I don't know. But hopefully that day never comes, folks. Welcome to the Chris Voss Show, the ChrisVossShow.com. Hey, coming to you with another great author that we have on the show. You're going to learn so much today. You're going to come out of the fog and into the clear with this today's show. I was trying to say this week. What the hell? The Today Show, not the Today Show. I'm going to get sued for copyright. We had some people from Good Morning America. That's not the Today Show. That's another show, isn't it? I don't think we have anybody on from the Today Show. We don't like those people. I don't know. No, I'm sure they're fine people. Anyway, guys, well, you know the drill. Welcome to the show. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. Go to all those crazy places on the interwebs. TikTok and LinkedIn are the primary sources of what we're doing. We're not sure what drunken Elon Musk is doing over on Twitter's, but we still have the show over there if you want to check that out as well. For, until Twitter goes bankrupt or whatever the hell's going on. The news on over there is spectacular. It's like watching someone burn down $44 billion at once just to, I don't know, because you can. It must be nice being the richest man in the world. Anyway, guys, on to our amazing author that we have on the show. She's the author of the newest book that came out May 21st, 2022. Out of the fog and into the clear. See, I teased that at the beginning of the show, but you didn't see that coming, did you? Out of the fog and into the clear, journaling to help you heal from toxic relationships. Shannon Petrovich is on the show with us today. She's going to be talking about her amazing new book, and she is of brilliant mind, which is the opposite of me. She is a therapist, author, YouTube creator. She has earned her bachelor's degree from Bowdoin College. And her master's, clearly I didn't go to college, right? What was that correction, Shannon? Jump in.
Bowdoin.
Bowdoin.
You got it right the first time.
I was trying to be fancy with the Bowdoin. I don't know what I'm trying to do. No one knows. And her master's in social work from the University of Connecticut. She earned her clinical licenses in social work and substance abuse counseling and is a board certified diplomat?
Diplomat, yeah.
Okay. A diplomat in clinical social work. Is there supposed to be an E at the end of that?
Yeah.
Oh.
For some reason there is.
Is that like a, okay, well, I clearly didn't go to college. I went to public school. So, that's where my problem was. Her new book, Out of the Fog and in the Clear, Journaling to Help You from Toxic Relationships, has attained Amazon bestseller status in self-help for abuse, codependency, and personal transformation. On her YouTube channel, Therapist Talks, she shares insights, information, perspectives, and strategies on a wide range of relationship and mental health topics. With a very trauma-informed and strength-based approach, she seeks to help people see the old stories that are in their way and fully become the person they were created to be. Welcome to the show. How are you, Shannon?
Thanks so much, Chris. I'm doing great. How about you?
Good. I am doing fine. It's Friday. We're just having a good old time. So give us your .coms or wherever you want people to find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, so my website is nofoggydays.com. You can also get there by therapisttalks.com. And that will show you the link to my book as well as my podcasts and also the all of the YouTube channel links and all of my other links. So nofoggydays.com or therapisttalks.com.
There you go. And so what motivated you on to write this book?
So about 5 years, I've been a therapist for 35 years. And about 5 years ago, I felt like there were so many millions of people in the world that didn't have access to any mental health information or perspectives or strategies. And I gathered a lot of information over the years. And I thought, man, everybody's kind of on YouTube. Maybe it's something I can do to share the things that I've learned. So I got on YouTube and started making videos about all kinds of mental health topics, from anxiety and depression and suicide to relationship issues. And pretty soon, the relationship ones were the ones blowing up. And especially people were really interested in narcissistic, abusive, and other toxic relationships. So that became my focus. And a couple hundred videos later and a lot of live streams. And I realized that in order to really help people get well from these relationships, I needed to pull it all together into a book. And I really wanted to do it as a workbook, a self-help book, something that people could use to actually gain some insights, perspectives, and strategies, and then walk through some journal prompts so that they could help themselves actually go from really feeling like they're in the fog to really being in the clear and rebuilding their lives.
Mm-hmm. And in the title of your book, The Fog refers to, what is it, an acronym? That one?
Fear, obligation, and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are lost in a relationship, typically they get inundated by the, it sneaks up on you. And that's kind of why the fog analogy kind of works too, because when you fall into an ocean fog, oftentimes it's kind of sneaky. And then all of a sudden you can't see anything and you're really lost in it. So relationships are like that too, where a lot of times you'll fall into, sort of some patterns that are toxic, but initially they seem pretty benign. But over time, if somebody is sort of love bombing you and making you feel great, and then devaluing you and isolating you from your people and gaslighting you and making you feel kind of crazy, and then over time sort of scaring you with little tantrums and little fear enhancing kind of activity and behaviors, so that you then start to placate them and people please and be a peacekeeper. And then gradually you start to feel really badly about yourself and really undermined and really lost. And yet they kind of come in just as you're getting sick of that, then they'll come in and love bomb you again. So that cycling gets you really hooked in, and your emotions get really lost in that fear, obligation, and guilt.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk about narcissistic abuse, and people have been, have you gotten set up on TikTok yet over there yet?
I haven't really tackled the TikTok thing that much.
You should,
So-
given I'm looking at your YouTube channel. It's awesome. You
Thanks.
should, because there's a lot of discussions over there, and TikTok has really become, it's just, I spend too much time on it. Everybody does. That's why Facebook and Twitter are struggling, because TikTok and Instagram even, and TikTok is really taken over. But there's a lot of discussions over there about toxicity abuse. In fact, and narcissist abuse. In fact, there's one channel that I keep tripping across where the gal is a diagnosed, narcissistic sociopath. And
Oh
she
my gosh.
literally, I think there's 2 or 3 people, and they literally talk about how they manipulate people.
Oh,
And it's the most frightening thing to watch. But you should go over there and check that out, because
I
there's
totally
a lot of narcissist abuse going on. How much is there of really diagnosed narcissist abuse going on? Because, I've met people on first dates that the last 20 boyfriends they've had were all narcissists. So how much of it is really going on in the marketplace with the percentage of people that are truly diagnosed as narcissist abuse?
Well, it's an interesting question,
Mm-hmm.
Chris, because I don't think there's any way to know how many narcissists are in the world. So when people say, oh, it's 6% of the population or 20%, nobody knows, because by definition, a narcissist doesn't believe that anything is their fault or anything is their problem. And so they're not going to show up for therapy. The only way narcissists ever show up for therapy is if somebody drags them there, and then they bail out as soon as the therapist confronts them. So they're just not going to, but you can't count them. The only way we know how many depressed people there are in the world is because they show up and they bill their insurance and they go to the hospital and things like that. So you can count those people. But narcissists are just out there kind of making havoc in the world. and they're not showing up for help. So I don't know how you could count them. So I think all the research is pretty bogus. But that being said, I think also it's become a real buzzword and it's become weaponized. So a lot of people will even be narcissistic in their traits and then call the other person narcissistic to try to basically flip the script and make it their fault that everything that toxic that they've been up to. So I think back in the day, there's always been bad behavior in the world. And in my early work, actually my first job out of college, a real job, was working at a domestic violence shelter. And certainly there was bad behavior going on, but we didn't use the word narcissist. So that's kind of been more over the past 5 or 10 years that people are using that term more. And I usually will try to refer to it as narcissistic traits because the true personality disorder is a lot more rare than the traits.
Okay. That's probably the big difference.
Right. And so there are a lot of people with narcissistic traits that don't have the full-blown personality disorder. And I think that's what people are mostly referring to. But also, like I said, people will flip the script and blame the other person so that they can kind of get out from under blaming themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we live in this world where we really have a problem of victimization, competition, and always wanting to be the victim. I mean, it's kind of crazy how far out there we've gotten. And the self-accountability, you know, we have to put up on signs on bridges saying, don't jump off the bridge or it'll kill you. And then if they do jump off the bridge, then they sue or something when they're injured. And you're like, but there was a sign that said, you know, but no, I'm a victim, you know, and, you know, millions of dollars later, you know, and it's just insane how, you know, I grew up in a world that they were like, no, jump off the bridge. You know, your parents were like, please, take him. Let pedophiles have fun. He's running around the neighborhood. He's right there. Just put a sign on him. You know, my mom would go into the store and leave us all in the car what was it in California was going at the time? I remember there was the, hillside, strangler, I think, was running around, and she would leave us in the car. We're like, you know, there's a madman running around killing people, Mom. She's like, yeah, she put a sign on the car. Take him, please. No, she wasn't that bad. I do jokes, but you know, I lived in a different time. You know, I lived in a time where Mom threw you out of the house and you didn't come back till, I don't know, the street lights came on or she yelled at you for dinner. But it seems like, you know, we live in this sort of victimized thing, and no one takes self accountability for like relationships. Like I say, I date a lot, and I'll sit and look at people. Have you done any work on yourself? Have you maybe it was you. You know, you mentioned something that was kind of funny that reminded me. One of my girlfriends, one time I was trying to save a relationship after a year and a half. And I was like, look, last ditch effort here, because we're going to break up at this point. I'm not dealing with you anymore. But last ditch effort, I'm going to throw a Hail Mary pass here. Let's go to counseling. I'm willing to go. Let's go to counseling because, you know, I'm the horrible person in this relationship. Let's go to counseling and we'll work it out. And freaking plain as day. A word for word verbatim. She goes, no, I'm not going to counseling. And I go, why not? And she goes, because the counselor will tell me that I'm the problem. And she knew, you know, and there was lots of gaslighting. I don't know if narcissistic behavior was going on, but just gaslighting and trying to cuck me into, you know, whatever sort of submission and get settled down. So yeah, it's interesting to me. But, yeah, you should definitely go on TikTok. Seriously. You'll make like trillions of dollars over there on TikTok. It's crazy. I've gotten so many of my friends of other businesses to go over there and we're trying to make it work and it's crazy. So I think this is good. The fear, obligation and guilt. Do you find that journaling is really an important part of helping people identify those patterns that are being put to them? And, you know, I certainly would have been helped by that. Like, you know, there's some strange stuff going on today and oh, it's the same as yesterday and the day before and the day before.
Yeah, I think it is really helpful and helping. And one of the things that's really critical is that we do take a look at anything that we are doing internally that is sort of our own toxic relationship with ourselves. And so, you know, I don't really feel like people who are victims are to blame, but there is a lot of, you know, when it sneaks up on you and someone victimizes you, you're not to blame for that. But on the other hand, when somebody is actually the victimizer and then tries to act the victim. Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So it's really critical to recognize too, if there are toxic things that you're saying to yourself. Are you your own worst enemy? Are you really hard on yourself? Are you constantly running yourself down inside your head? Because if that's true, then you may be more accepting of that behavior in other people. And you might, and if you want to get free from that other person who's running you down, you also have to look at how you're running yourself down, or you will not be able to stand up to that other person.
Mm-hmm.
So the internal work has to start, and then extends to the outside, and, standing up to that other person and starting to set boundaries and starting to look at all the ways that we've fallen into patterns of placating and people pleasing. Because when you do that, you are not telling the truth and you're not standing your ground or holding boundaries. So when you can figure out what your boundaries are, like, I'm not going to let you talk to me that way anymore. When you're being explosive, I'm going to leave the house, or I'm going to hang up the phone. And then when you do that, then you give the other person the opportunity to grow. And if it's in the milder, more moderate range of behaviors, that person might decide, oh man, I do want to save this relationship. I'm going to stop doing that. And then you've got a potential there. But if that person escalates, and when you ask to be heard and seen and a part of the relationship 100%, and then they escalate into violence or more badgering and more belittling and more manipulative and controlling behaviors, then you know for sure that that's not your circus, not your monkeys, and you got to get done with it. So,
do you normally find that people that are the biggest problem in the relationship are the ones who are the most reluctant to go to counseling, and the people who are most interested in counseling are the people who, they're really trying to find a pathway. They're really trying to fix stuff.
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. The people that show up are usually those empathic, compassionate, caring people, and they're trying to drag their partner in because they want to fix them. But, typically over the course of time, if they can get that partner in at all, they bail out as soon as they get confronted on any of their behaviors.
Yeah.
Or as soon as the boundaries are set and they don't like that. But it's that caring, compassionate, empathic person who shows up and does the work and hopefully gets stronger, sets those boundaries, learns to stop the placating and peacekeeping so that they can get clear and strong and get free of that, emotionally free at least, and sometimes physically free. Sometimes people do choose to stay in a relationship with boundaries, and that's fine too, unless there's violence. And then I absolutely insist that people get out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a journey, and typically as people get stronger, and I really encourage them to learn to emotionally step back and watch instead of getting all involved and engaged in it and sucked into it. So a lot of times when a person can emotionally step back and watch, then I call it watching the circus go by. So you want to be able to watch the games and watch the manipulation and watch the control antics, because it's almost like they have a big smorgasbord in front of them. So they'll try the anger and that doesn't work. So then they try pouting, and then they'll switch to sort of threats of this or that. And then they'll switch to just running you down and making you feel crappy. And then they'll switch to guilt, and then they'll switch back to anger. So it's like bouncy, bouncy, bounce. It's like whack-a-mole. And every time, something else pops up. So it's really important to recognize it's not about you. Those are all just the same game. They're just in different guises. So it's manipulation and control in different guises. And when you can step back from that, then you don't get sucked in anymore.
Yeah. It's the emotions of it. I mean, that's why, I think a lot of healthy men like myself, we use a lot of stoicism. We try not to get sucked into emotional responses and emotional abuses, but there's so many men nowadays that have grown up with this whole new age thing that are very emotional, and they're more in their feminine than they are in their masculine. And so they really struggle with responding, at least from what I see, struggling with responding, and they meet emotion with emotion. And then it's just explosive. Yeah, one of the things you talk about in the book is understanding trauma bonding and how to untangle the unhealthy attachment. We had someone on just earlier today. We were talking about, how people grow up and how their parenting is the example they see from their parents it sets the tone or sets the, okay, this is what a relationship is and this is what you do. And if that relationship is toxic, either their relationship with their parents or their parents' relationship with each other, they tend to replicate that in their relationships. Is that true? Do you find that?
I do. And it's a little more complicated than that because each kid it's not exactly what happens to us. It's how we story it inside ourselves. And it's how we act in what role we find in that family. So some kids in that family will find themselves in the role of wanting to be like the abusive, toxic parent. And other kids will find themselves in the role of wanting to be the placater peacekeeper in the family. And others will be the hero child. Like if I am perfect and everything in my life is perfect, then I can take the heat off of mom and dad and what they're going through and what they're acting out on each other. So it depends a lot on how the kid internalizes it. Now, some kids will internalize that as, well, there's all this going on. I'm completely uncared about, unworthy, unlovable, not important, a burden even. And so when you carry those stories into adulthood, you set yourself up for being in a relationship where someone treats you that way. Not because you deserve that on any level, but it's just that subconsciousness with that subconscious message and story inside your head lets you let people treat you the way you're treating yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Does the birth order have any play into that as well as to your interpretation? Because there's some theories on that, I guess.
Yeah. And I like the birth order book because it does talk about the different roles. And sometimes they play out that way, but a lot of times they don't. I think it has to do with so many complexities of, each of us are nature and nurture. So we're each wired a certain way. And then we have experiences when we come out of the womb. So we've got who we are kind of as people. And I think people are typically wired either less empathically or more empathically. And I think there is some evidence to that there are certain parts of the brain that make us more empathic or less empathic, more self-centered or less self-centered. And so that kind of sets us up for whether we're going to be that less empathic. We're going to model ourselves after that less empathic parent or the more empathic parent. And then we fall into those roles. So I don't think it's as much about the birth order book or the birth order as it can be about how we're basically wired.
That's interesting. Because you got me thinking about this. The middle child, sometimes goes for a lot of attention and it has that attention seeking because they're stuck in the middle, or at least that's the theory of that. And I could see what you're saying. It's really interesting to me. I've never heard anybody say what you said where it's also how you interpret that. And that's really true. Your whole life experience, two people can go to a party. One person can see that it was a great party and everyone had fun and he focused on the people that were having fun. Another person go to the same party and be like, that was dark and depressing. That was a horrible party. It was not fun, because they focus on, what they see. And that interpretation is really the key. And that's really amazing to me. I never thought of it from that angle.
Yeah,
how you interpret the parents. I've always just kind of gone off the thing. I was watching something recently where, a lot of studies that go on with single parents, because we have more single parents now than ever before, at least in America. And I've always been able to witness through dating all my life what it's like with daughters who grow up without fathers or grow up with bad fathers. And when I'm dating, that's always one of the things I try and determine right away is if she had a healthy relationship with her father, because that makes all the world in the difference. It's what Chris Rock would say, keeping her off the pole. If you're a bad father, or if you're a father who's not there for her, you don't set a good example as a good male role model in her life, then that's going to affect her through most of her life. The same thing with sons. I was watching, someone had some data on sons. If sons grow up with a single mother and they see the mother struggling, they try and save the mother. And that they end up becoming a male who always wants to bail women out, and they become, and that affects their relationships in the future. So it's interesting to me, and the perspective of it, what you mean. Wow. I mean, I know the birth order is important. The first child, of course, is always the smartest, the brilliant, the best looking, and the greatest.
You the first child, Chris.
Involved. How'd you know? See, you knew because there it was. And then the rest of the children, they're just kind of left over. I tell
pretty mediocre.
I tell my siblings I took all the good stuff out of the womb, and they just got they just got the thrift store leftovers. But I'm not sure they agree with me. But that's
I've got it.
I might be the narcissist in the family too.
Yeah, we won't go there.
Just diagnose me right there.
I can share with you a great example of what you're just talking about, though, too, is that when I worked in the domestic violence shelter, I'll never forget this little boy. He was only 3 years old, and he wanted some candy before supper, and his mom said no. And he literally balled up his fist and punched her in the thigh, because that's how little he was, and called her an effing B. Wow. And I was just floored. At 3 years old, he'd absorbed that was how you got your way and how you got what you wanted. And then the opposite of that is I've seen 6-year-olds who are constantly worried about their mother and will act out in such over empathic ways and over worried about their single mother that they are probably setting themselves up to be that rescuer guy for women for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. I've also seen another thing I've been seeing or understanding lately is the husbandry of the son, where when the divorce happens, the son gets all this pressure to basically be the man of the house. Mm-hmm. And the pressure is a lot of pressure to do a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or any young man. And then they spoil the crap out of the son. They treat the son like they would a husband, and spoiling them and taking care of them. And it can either lead to where they aren't ambitious, later in life. They just want to just not do anything, or they end up being that subservient role of trying to make everybody happy. Let's move to one of my favorite topics that I've learned a lot about lately, and I think it's really important: boundaries, how to create, maintain them with people that don't respect them. You talk about that in the book as well.
Yeah, I think this is a really important topic, and people will tell me, even on my channel, people make comments in the comment section, and they'll say boundaries don't work. And I'll say, you know what? Boundaries always work, because either they help you clarify that this relationship isn't going to work, or they help clarify what will help this relationship work and fix it. So when you set a boundary, you have to get clear in your head about what you're willing to put up with, because a boundary is just how I take care of myself in a relationship. So it isn't, people say, well, that's an ultimatum. That's not right. No, it's not. It's how I take care of myself in the relationship. So if somebody is going off on me, I'm going to hang up the phone, or I'm going to leave the house. I'm going to leave that situation. I'm going to walk away. Now, if I really care about that relationship, I'll say, we can talk about this later when you calm down, or we can talk about this later when you can be respectful, or when, I can feel heard, or something specific and clear like that. And then leaving and then coming back and trying again later. Mm-hmm. And with somebody, like I said, who's not as in the milder range, I'll put it in those toxic qualities, they will take those grown-up timeouts and they will learn from them and realize, oh, okay, every time I do that, I get my grown-up timeout, and I don't like that. And so I'm going to stop behaving that way. And over time, they will stop behaving that way. Whereas somebody who will not let you exist in the relationship, won't let you be a whole person, won't let you have your thoughts, feelings, wants, needs, they're going to make it clear by escalating, being really mad, making their behavior even worse until you stop giving them the grown-up timeouts. So you have to recognize. So when you present a boundary and you hold to your boundary, then you got to kind of step back and emotionally watch and notice.
Yeah. My favorite boundary is we're breaking up and you stay on that side of the country and I'm going to stay on this side of the country and don't call me. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I do use that a lot. No, boundaries are really important. I've learned more and more about them over the years. I'd always called them rules. I didn't know what I was talking about, but I always knew rules. There's a certain boundary that I have for my peace and respect. And I'm very well in it. I've never been married, so I've never been into a situation where I couldn't walk away from. And so I've always been able to have the rule, like, look, you either change your stuff or I'm out the door. I don't get talked to a certain way. I don't get treated a certain way. If someone wants to have a logical reasoning conversation with me, I can talk about your feelings, but they can't be, screaming at me at decibels 110 or, in an irrational state. But I've always had boundaries. And like you say, I give a timeout. I'll block your number. I'll block stupid texts. I'll cut people off. I'll give them, a week timeout. But it's easier for me to do that because I'm single. It's much harder to do that when you live with people. How important is it to hold to those boundaries? So when people cross that line, you've got to be the enforcer of that line. Is that why people that tell you boundaries don't work, as you mentioned before, they're just not, as soon as that line gets crossed, they're not enforcing it?
Well, I think it probably has to do with a lot of different things. One is that they may not fully understand what the boundaries, how to really clean up the inside work. Like I said, you can't be running yourself down and take care of yourself at the same time. You have to really become your own best friend. You have to become self-compassionate. You have to be okay being in your own skin and being separate and single, or being separate and, going for a walk for a couple of hours so that both people can calm down. And when I work with couples, what I do is I talk about putting your intensity on a 0 to 10 scale. People don't like to talk about anger, so you can talk about intensity, because it isn't always anger. It could be tears and like screaming out of angst and upset and anxiety and all of that. So we talk about intensity on a 0 to 10 scale. So you want to stay in the 0 to 5 range. Anything from 5 to 10 is just craziness. So it's raging, or it's tears, or it's, histrionics, or it's, threats of suicide, threats of violence. It's all just way off the rails, and nothing good is going to happen in that range. So we talk about staying in the 0 to 5. And if it starts to get to 6, then you need to take yourself for a timeout, go for a walk, take a deep breath, go get a cup of tea, just calm down and wind down, because you're not going to resolve anything if you're in the 5 to 10 range, because you're in the fight, flight, and freeze, and you're also triggering the other person into fight, flight, and freeze. Nothing good happens in that place.
That's true. Because I'm on the flight mode. I'm out the door. I'm blocking the number on. I run all my numbers through Google Voice. So when I want to disappear, about 20 years ago or something, Google Voice came out. Grand Central was the company, and then Google bought it and called it Google Voice. And it's the most beautiful thing to time out people, because you can literally block a number and it gives them a message basically saying you didn't pay your bill. So if I have someone who comes to my dating life that's toxic and it's time to go, I just block the number. And if they're a woman, they're just like, I'm not, this guy can't pay his bill, so I'm not going to stick around. So screw this guy. And I'm like, cool, problem solved. But there have been times where I have to go, I'm blocking your number for a couple of days until you calm down. And, we can talk later. And then they used to come over and be like a week later, and go, are you going to unblock my number? Oh yeah, I forgot about that. It's challenging with people nowadays, especially like I say, people always ask me, they go, Chris, what would you tell your 16-year-old self? And I always reply the same. Everyone's always says something like invest in Bitcoin or, some stupid like that. And I'm always like, go to freaking therapy. For hell's sakes, go to therapy. I had a horrible ADHD when I was a kid. I don't know that I still do. I think I grew out of it. Depends on how much coffee I drink nowadays. But, being self-aware is really important. You mentioned a good point of being comfortable in your skin and stuff. One of the problems I see with a lot of people is there's a lot of monkey branching going on nowadays, especially with social media, because it makes it real easy to get to the next person because they're in your DMs. And a lot of people, they just don't heal from relationships, or they don't really deal with, they just run around and go, that person's a narcissist, and they jump to the next relationship. And they haven't really done the work on themselves to get clear and solid and clean with themselves. Now, am I crazy for thinking that, or?
No, that's really important. And the last several chapters of my book are really all about rebuilding your sense of self, rebuilding your connections, and rebuilding your whole life. Because if you've been in a really toxic relationship, you have been so focused on that person's every whim, will, mood, emotion, up, down, sideways, their thoughts, their feelings, their wants, their needs, their dreams, their aspirations, that you have ceased to exist for however many months or years you've been with them. So you have to rebuild your sense of self and your connections and your life. And I walk through lots of different strategies on doing that and make sure that people redo that. And then you have to rebuild a sense of a good, solid creepometer so that you don't get sucked into another crappy relationship. Because people do. We tend to go where we are familiar. And I won't say comfortable, because it's absolutely not comfortable. And so people make the mistake of calling it comfortable. Yeah. It's not comfortable. It's miserable, but it's familiar. And so we have to recognize why we gravitate to that familiar, and then determine that we're not going to do that anymore. And the way we can not do that anymore is recognizing there are two parts of our brain that are really important. There's our rational brain, where we can be logical and think things through. And then there's our emotional mind, that little monkey mind, that amygdala, that just goes fight, flight, or freeze. And it goes love. And, and especially if you're intimate too soon, it goes way into attachment too quickly. Right. And as soon as you get your little amygdala emotional mind attached to somebody, your rational mind goes offline, and then you don't have the ability to be logical and to look at really what's going on. You don't notice the behaviors that you should notice. You don't notice the toxicity that you should have noticed, the selfishness, the self-obsession, the manipulation, the control, and all that stuff. And so you've disabled your creepometer by being intimate too soon. So I also really talk to people about recognizing that you shouldn't really be trusting someone with your body and your attachment, your emotional attachment, unless you know them well enough to hand them the keys to your car, the keys to your house, and your PIN number to your bank account. And everybody goes, "Oh, wait a minute."
Yeah, not the.
I didn't know them that. I didn't know them that well.
I'll loan you my car. Not the.
But really, to hand over your attachment to someone.
Well, it's a good
we
point.
Get attached so quickly.
It's a good point. I can validate this because anytime I've dated someone who is willing to sleep with you on the first date, there usually is. I don't want to throw everyone in the bus as a narcissist, but there's that attachment they're trying to hook, they're trying to get into you. And I found many times after that, there's the creep factor 10 goes off. There's a lot of love bombing. And I think that's part of it, right? The narcissistic love bombing part with it, to try and get that attachment hook and then love bomb you and get you hooked in and then start playing games with the fishing rod. I always kind of like it, kind of like fishing, where they'll pull on you and they let you run out and it's like a love. I used to call it a love withdrawal game. I don't know if that's a technical term for it, but I've seen a lot of that where it's a love withdrawal game where it's like, hug you, love. Oh, bye. I don't want anything to do with you. It's constantly back and forth. So
come here, go away.
Exactly. Yeah. Clearly, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I played one on the relationships. The amateur. So I think it's real important. And I love the idea of the journaling part. I really should have kept better journals in my relationships. My last big relationship, I recognized there were certain dates that were going on where I would see changes to the sex in the relationship. I would see different patterns to the energy in the relationship. One of my relationships, after 3 months, the sex died and the energy died. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. Didn't realize till a year and a half later that she'd gone off of her meds that she had for she had cancer. It was a cancer of the pituitary gland. I forget what it's called, Cushing's disease. And I didn't realize that that was the whole factor that crashed the relationship. Neither did she. She just went off her meds because she was tired of taking them. And yeah, and there was a whole mess of other complications that came from that. But journaling and sitting down and recognizing what's going on in your relationships, I think is real important because this stuff sneaks up on you and you don't see it. Like I remember discovering the bottles of medication a year and a half later after I'd thrown her out of the house and was moving out her stuff. And I called her up and I go, what is this medication that's here? It looks like it quit being taken. Oh, that was my cancer medication. Yeah, I quit taking that about 3 months into a relationship, and suddenly, like, all the timelines converged, and I was like, mother of, wow, this whole thing, I should have been asking questions. She told me she had cancer when we got together, the pituitary gland, but it was manageable, and she's pretty vain about getting the nose off. I'm starting to do a session with you here, aren't I? But no, I'm just trying to paint a picture here of how...
I have to bill you later.
Yeah, you will. I'm just trying to paint a picture for people here how those timelines are really important.
Yeah.
And what you put in the book about journaling. I mean, I really love this idea. I've always joked about how I should probably film the first few months of my relationship when they're like, you're Superman, you're the greatest guy ever. And then like a year later, they're like, you're an asshole. And you're like, hey, what happened to that person? Play the film, Bob. That's always been a joke that I do. But, no, I love the idea of journaling. I really like this idea. That's basically what I'm saying.
I think it really can be helpful. I think of it as a dialogue with yourself, and you can use it in any which way you want. Some people aren't going to use the prompts in my book for journaling, but they'll use them to think about or to talk with a good friend or even to use in therapy sessions. I mean, I wish everybody could have a therapist that they really vibed with, that they could really get help from, but we just know that that's not reality for most of the people in the world. So this is a book where you can use it with or without a therapist, and you can use it in the journaling or not. But I like to journal, and I always have, in terms of like venting, blah, 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 and then I'll yab it. So I'll kind of come back in with my healthier self and go, yeah, but it's really not that bad. And really what you need to do is A, B, and C. And so I'll use it to kind of set goals and set myself back on track. And that's always what I've used it for. But in the book, I really talk about how to recognize the old stories that you've internalized, find out where they came from. Was it from somebody directly saying that to you in childhood, or was it your interpretation of what was going on around you? Sometimes people will have an experience and they interpret it so childlike, and then they carry that story with them for the rest of their lives until they take it out and look at it. And then they take it out and look at it in session. They'll go, well, that's silly. And I'll say, well, as for a child, it's not silly, but for a grown up looking at it, yeah, it is. You don't need to live with that anymore. So it's helping people do that kind of work.
I totally agree with you on this concept.
Yeah. And then the other piece of the journaling that's super critical is journaling out the relationship, so that if this person is running you down and making you feel terrible and they've done this, this, and this, and then you blow it, so you're kind of giving yourself an accountability record, so that you're recognizing the rational facts of the relationship, just the facts. And then you can make a good decision about getting free from that relationship instead of getting sucked in again and again and again.
I like that. It has always seemed to me, and you're the psychologist here, I'm not, but it's always seemed to me that most relationships break up because those instances and those grievances just stack and stack and
Mm-hmm.
stack. And when I've done my house cleaning after a relationship, one of the most important things I learned in dating all my life was, after you break up from a relationship of any good length, you need to spend maybe a year or two cleaning up, depend upon the length of the marriage, maybe 3 years. I won't date anybody who's not been divorced for 2 or 3 years. I just won't. I've learned that you haven't done the work. You haven't cleaned up your mess. You gotta go into the wilderness and do your thing. Part of it's an identity thing too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's where people really get lost, is because the marriage or the relationship, the two as one people, become an identity. And so you've got to clear all that baggage out. You've got to rediscover who you are and rebuild that and be, who am I? I don't know. I got 6 personalities. I ask them, and whichever one's up on deck is who we are that day. We've all seen that movie. People need to redo that. I had a friend recently, he got divorced, and he was married to his childhood sweetheart in an LDS church. So you know what that means. And, first loves on each of them. Married he was in his 50s. So that would have been 35 years. And, one day his wife says, hey, I'm, going to go get my freak on or something. I don't know. She pulls a hold of Giselle, and, they're just like, they break up, 35 years done. And it's even harder for them because that Mormon mindset is you stay together for eternity.
Yeah.
I can't last 20 minutes over coffee with people, but, there goes my first date. But that's a joke. Yeah, it's 25. I can do. Me and my friends are like, we've been together for 30 years. I've been like, I can't make 30 minutes work. So anyway, he wanted to jump back, right? He's like, I'm dating. And I'm like, you're crazy, man.
Crazy.
You're crazy. Why are you dating? I'm like, dude, you've got to spend at least 3 to 5 years in the wilderness, man, rebuilding who you are and stuff. But yeah, people just jump right back in these relationships. And you talk about that in the book, rebuilding your sense of self, creating healthy self-care strategies and things. But leaving emotionally as well as physically, this is one of the other tidbits in the book. Do you mean when you say leaving emotionally as in like when you're in that battle for boundaries like we talked about earlier, or leaving emotionally behind a relationship that you left?
Both. So sometimes people decide that they have to stay in some sort of relationship, or they don't decide, but they are required to because they're co-parenting kids or what have you. So you have a lot of different situations where you need to emotionally leave and maybe even physically stay present. And then you have people who've been gone from your life, gone from a relationship for many, many years, and still emotionally just as hooked in as they were the day they left. Mm. So I wanted to share those perspectives and insights and strategies specifically to help people who have to stay in relationship and need to learn to emotionally separate, and also for the people who haven't healed, even though they've been out of the relationship for many, many years. And that's, such a sad thing for me to see. But a lot of times it's because you still have your own sense of self and self-perception hooked into that. And we have such a wonky sense of self in our world today. People don't understand what self-esteem is. And, so I talk about that in the book too, that sense of self is really about your character qualities and your values. Mm-hmm. And if your sense of self is wrapped up in your job, your bank account, your hair, your nails, your whatever, that's not a healthy sense of self. And it isn't really who you are. Mm-hmm. And it's also extremely fragile because people have bad hair days.
That's why I wear a hat on the show. Every day is every day is a bad hair day.
So you have to regroup in that way and really write down. There's a whole bunch of journal prompts around what are your character qualities? What are your values? How close to your values are you living? What do you need to work on? What do you want to work on? So that people can rebuild a solid sense of self from which to launch into a new life.
Yeah. It's so important to do that cleaning and clearing, you know. I mean, those are the people that you meet on dates where you go on a first date with them and they talk to you endlessly about their emotion. They're still emotionally wrapped up in there.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yeah, you're clear yet. You gotta go fix that. I don't need to be pulled into any of that. And,
If people have bitterness still, you don't want any
Yeah.
part of that. If people are still hooked into that, and if they're still all messed up over that person, or if they haven't learned anything.
You know, one thing that's hard, I don't know if you deal with it a lot in your practice. I imagine you do. One of the hard parts is when you come into a relationship with someone who's divorced. And, you know, I'm used to ruining my relationships and pissing her off. Like, you know, I leave with socks on the floor. I'm one of those horrible, people. And, that's usually my giant crime, socks and underwear on the floor in the bathroom. And, I have a funny story about that, but I'm wasting too much time. But, it is funny. But what am I trying to segue into here? A lot of times though, I would come home and she would be angry and I'd be like, you know, what have I done? And, you know, it's the ex hasn't paid the child support. The ex has pulled some stunt. How important is it for maybe people in relationships that, you know, to recognize that behavior and make sure they're not turning up to, as you said, up to a 10 for something that isn't that partner's fault?
Yeah, I think communication is key, and having an ability to share with each other and to stay on the same team.
Yeah.
And that's really important. And to recognize when each other's intensity is a lot, and then to reflect that back to each other. You know, when I come home and you're really wound up or upset with him, but I'm kind of taking it in the short for what he did.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of throws me off. And I at least need a minute to, like, hey, let's give each other a hug and a kiss first, and then I'll let you vent.
Yeah.
Or let me know what you need or something like that. Yeah.
I saw this TikTok recently, this guy who his gal breaks down on him when she finds out that one of her ex-boyfriends is having a baby with his new girlfriend. And I was like, holy crap, that's a whole psychological, I don't know, man, you might want to leave her. I don't know what's going on there. But, she was crying because he's having a baby with the new girlfriend. He wouldn't have a baby with her. I guess, I don't know, man. It's a whole lot of, man, this is one of the reasons I'm still single at 54. It's tough out there, man. It's gotten a lot worse. Crazy. One other thing I wanted to touch on, placating people. Doing the peacekeeping thing. One of the things we're really guilty of as guys is trying to be the peacekeepers and placating. We just want everybody to be happy. We want our peace. You know, we want to sit down and have a beer. We want to tune out. We want to have our own little space. And that's kind of how we deal with stuff after we went out, you know, slaying demons all day. How important is it to recognize that we're doing that, and we need to set some boundaries around that?
You know, I think what's important, and people, and, you know, men and women will do a lot of the 3 Ps: peacekeeping, placating, and people pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
We all think that we're doing people a favor. We think that that's wonderful, that makes us saintly and the martyr and blah, 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 blah. And that's all BS. It's really important to recognize that not being honest is BS. It's straight and simple BS. So I think that's the first piece, is that you have to recognize that you're not doing anybody any favors by doing the 3 Ps, and you're undermining yourself and your own communication, and you're really undermining the relationship and the ability of the relationship to be genuine and to grow. So it's extremely important that you recognize the times that you're doing that, and just recognize what's the truth. You know, I know a lot of people who, just to keep the peace, they won't tell the truth about going to go shopping or going to get something or going to meet a friend or whatever. It's just better to be truthful, because we all know when someone's not being straight with us. And so if they don't tell you what's really going on, you're going to make up a story anyway.
Mhm.
And how many fights were started because somebody was mad about something that if it was just stated up front, it wouldn't have been an issue. But it's because it went underground and then became like, well, why aren't you telling me this? And so then it became bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's just a better idea if you stop undermining yourself and the relationship and just be straight. Say what you mean what you say, and don't mean when you say it.
There you go.
Very simple.
After my last relationship, I joked, I go, if I ever get in a relationship long term again, I'm going to have just from the very get go, like from the first month, just start having psychiatrist visits. Because I could see, I'm not going to say all of my relationships, it's been 50-50. I've done bad stuff. They've done bad stuff. The stuff didn't mix like oil and water. And I take full responsibility for it. All my girlfriends were wonderful. They loved me. They tried. We did our best with whatever kind of crap we had going on with ourselves. And, that's just it. But I take responsibility for what I do. But I did see in looking back at my relationships, there were these the death of 1,000 cuts,
Mm-hmm.
There was, okay, this I let slide, or she let this slide, or, we did this and we probably should have talked about that and then resolved that. And I could just see how it just stacked,
Right.
And, so I like the idea of the journaling thing because it's much cheaper than going to see a psychiatrist, people. But then I still don't know. I don't know. Would it be better to go see a psychiatrist once a month in the first year of a relationship?
Oh yeah, I think it'd be a great idea, and take her with you because she's going to out you to the therapist.
Yeah.
Because and I think that we all have blind spots, and I'm super happily married, and yet I have blind spots. And when he points one out to me, as much as I have to kind of take a deep breath not to be upset, I'm thankful because I think that ideally we sand the rough edges off our personalities, of each other's personalities. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you can be in that genuinely open, willing place in the beginning of a relationship, and I also think it's extremely important to be straight up and honest in the beginnings about what you're looking for, what you want, what you don't want. Because people tend to be very closed book and closed mouthed about stuff until it's all built up, like you said.
Yeah.
So it's really important just to be open and honest. And if you can go see a therapist once a month and check in, I think that's a great thing.
Yeah. Before it's like have the car. It's kind of that whole thing of have the car serviced. Have the oil changes done before the engine blows up on.
Right.
Because it's too hard when you're like trying to resolve the issues and and she's got 20 issues and you got 20 issues and you're just trying to dig out of a bottomless pit of a hole. And to me, like I said, I can look back on most of my relationships and go, I wish I would address that then. And I wish I would address that. But this is so important for, like I say, I just love the idea of journaling. And if I get in a relationship, I'm going to do journals and stuff because there's so many things, red flags. There's so many issues, and one other thing is my girlfriend, when I said to her after a year and a half, let's go to therapy. And she says, no, because therapists tell me if I would have done that early on in the first month and learned that she was not somebody who was going to be self-reflective, then there's your sign, as the famous comedian says. Well, this has been wonderfully insightful. I really want people to check out your book and read more about it and to get to know you better. And I've been looking over as we've been talking your whole YouTube channel. You really want to get, you're going to send me a check for $10,000 after you get on TikTok. I swear to God, you're going to be a god on TikTok.
You teach me how to do it?
Kind of, yeah. It's, I mean, you're basically what you do on YouTube, only you have like 10 minutes. And you know.
Oh, I thought all TikToks were like 30 seconds. Are they 10 minutes?
They're 10 minutes now. It used to be they were 30 seconds. Then they gave you 3, and then like we were trying to do the show with some sort of 60-second thing. But the conversations over there about relationships and narcissism are epic.
Okay.
Epic. And so you will kill it over there, and you can probably just recycle a lot of your content you're using on YouTube, because you've got a lot of videos. How many videos do you have on here? You got a ton.
150 or something.
Yeah, you got a lot of them going on and stuff. I'm going to have to watch your video on Amber and the Amber Heard. I think I saw somewhere in here. Oh, and Jada and Will Smith. I'm watching that one too. I'll fall down. I like watching car crashes. That's my thing.
That's pretty wild.
One of me and it used to keep my girlfriends and I talking after a breakup, but me and my girlfriends, we'd always watch Cheaters back when it was popular during the day.
Oh, wow.
You see that?
No.
And the beautiful part, Cheaters is great because if you know how the show works.
That sounds painful.
It's really good. It's like when I used to get depressed, and I would get really depressed, and I'd be sitting down with a bottle of vodka, and I'd be like, oh, God, my life is horrible. I'm going nowhere in life. And then I watch Cops for 2 hours, the show Cop.
Oh,
and by the time I was done, I'd be like, shit, my life is great. Right. I'm never getting arrested. I'm never in jail. I don't have the cops knocking on my door. I'm not the guy in the wife beater in the trailer home who always, he's always going to pick a fight with the cops and go to the jail. And, geez, wow. After looking at these people's lives, I'm great. And so Cheaters is great because they find cheaters, and this detective firm comes in and they follow the person around they think is cheating. And at the end, they have a confrontation of like, hey, you cheated. And, they usually catch them with the cheater. So that just makes it more juicy. And, I don't know, maybe the reason me and my girlfriend's just to watch it is because you get done, you're like, we're not that bad. But
our relationship's pretty dark.
Like, seriously, after my girlfriends and I break up, sometimes they'd call me and, hey, you want to watch Cheaters together? Oh, sure. No, we'd watch over the phone. Old times. But, that's one. My rule is if you're going to cheat, just break up and leave.
No kidding.
Yeah, that or find out why you're wanting to cheat or what your issue is. But yeah, so I really love this idea of journaling. And of course, I'm glad you verified my thing. Go see a therapist early on. Don't let everything stack up. And sometimes the poor therapist is probably sitting there going, oh God, 20 years of 50,000 freaking issues and items. And, they're going, yeah, you remember when you hit the dog in 2013? And, you're just like, oh, for the love of God, man. I don't know. I'd be I should probably go to a therapist, but I'd be one of those mean therapists. I'd be like a shock me. Anyway, I'm going to quit the comment bits.
He'd be like, knock it off.
I'm going to save this for the stage. So thank you very much for coming on the show, Shannon. We really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Chris. This has been a complete blast, and I really appreciate you talking, deep into the issues and then having some laughs and diving into the issues again. It's really been great.
Yeah. We call it info entertainment. It's kind of like Stephen Colbert, where we educate people, we make them laugh, and hopefully somewhere between that laughter, we sneak some info in their head and they go, I'm smarter.
Absolutely.
Because if you weren't on the show, people would just be dumber because I'd just be here talking a bunch of BS and telling stupid stories, and people would be just like, I've lost 5 IQ points. Anyway, give us your .com, Shannon, so people can find you on the interwebs.
NoFoggyDays.com or therapisttalks.com will get you to the same spot. It's the landing page for my book and my YouTube channel and blog and all other stuff.
There you go. No more foggy days. I think that's what they used to call it when I used to drink. Out of the fog and into the clear, journaling to help you heal from toxic relationships. Came out May 21st, 2022. Those of you watching this 10 years from now. Be sure to order the book wherever fine books are sold. Stay away with those alleyway bookstores. I got a tetanus shot after stepping on a nail in one. Go to wherever fine books are sold. Fine books are sold. It's Friday, man. We're just crashing on our way out the door. Anyway, guys, go to youtube.com, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, all the places we are on the interwebs, and check out her YouTube channel, which is really informative, and also watch for her to be on TikTok soon. So there you go. Anyway, guys, be good to each other, stay safe, get some therapy, damn it, and we'll see you next time. That might be my